And so all we want is just an attorney general's office that is well established, well resourced, and you know, I hate to say it, but we need to have a competent leader that understands the law and respects the rule of law.
Up day, it's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson, and welcome to another edition of the Innovate Guam podcast, a podcast where we explore all things innovation, technology, and improvement related to the island of Guam. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Substack. My podcasts drop at the beginning of each week. Also, be sure to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of each month. All right, we have a very special guest today, and I'm excited to have this conversation. He is a son of Guam who grew up on the island in the 1970s and 1980s, raised in modest circumstances and very open about his childhood experiences with poverty and struggle. He was born in Agate and has been a long-time resident of Jigo, and he's now running for election as Attorney General of Guam in 2026. He's a former Guam Police Department officer who served the community on the front lines of public safety for about 8 years before entering military service. He is a United States Army Judge Advocate General or JAG officer. He's been a military magistrate and a combat veteran with 4 tours. He's a former criminal prosecutor and now serves as a defense attorney on Guam, bringing experience on both sides of the courtroom. He is an adjunct professor and legal educator. And as I said before, he is a candidate for Attorney General of Guam. And he's going to talk a little bit about his platform. Above all, he is an outstanding servant leader, returning home to serve at greater capacity to help the people of Guam. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Peter J. Santos.
Good
Peter,
day, everyone.
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Rob. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Well, we're excited to have you, and we're excited for this conversation. So we have a tradition here. We start off with some icebreaker questions, get a sense of where your head is at in terms of innovation in your background. So talk to me. What's your definition of innovation, and what does innovation mean to you?
Well, based on my early experiences in the Guam Police Department, as well as my military career, I have always been forced or pushed, rather, to look at what we're doing and see where we can improve. And so that's really my idea and definition of innovation, is to make changes to increase efficiency and outputs, right? Likewise, I don't want to just innovate the AG's office. I want to revolutionize it, which is like innovation on steroids, right? It's making extreme changes. And the reason why I want to...
It's not incremental change, it's radical change quickly.
Right, and that's just based because I was working at the AG's office. I have seen it slide backwards with the last couple of AGs. And so I think that we really need to rebuild from the ashes and revolutionize how business is done. But also, having been back on Guam for the last 10 years and working in Guam and talking to different counterparts in the agencies of the government, I see a lot of areas that can really, really use improvement. And what they need is technical assistance, legal technical assistance. And my, if you allow me out, my approach would be what I call preventative law. And I didn't invent that. That is something that was taught and instilled in us as JAG officers. We prevent things. There's a saying, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. And so that's what I see happening, plaguing the island, with, problems. Just today, what did we see in the news? The Simon Sanchez groundbreaking, and you know, this is a project, Simon Sanchez High School project, has, been trying to get off the ground. It hasn't gotten off the ground
Right.
for like 12, 15 years. All of a
Right.
sudden, they were supposed to have a groundbreaking. All of a sudden, somebody, you know, decides to protest and brings the whole thing to a grinding halt, a screeching halt. And that's a problem of our procurement system and our procurement process. We need to be
Well, I
able
know
to
you're going
do
to talk a
things.
lot about the procurement system and all that a little bit later on, but just kind
Yes.
of walking through, you've worn a lot of uniforms over the years. You've been Guam Police Department officer, an Army JAG, a magistrate, a prosecutor, now defense attorney. What's one story or moment that really shaped your leadership perspective on what it means to be a leader and to serve?
There are many, Rob, but one that stands out is when I graduated from the police academy. And back then there wasn't social media and all these things, right? So people didn't really
Hmm.
know what other people were up to. Nowadays, we know what everyone's eating for lunch, right? But back then, nobody knew what you were up to unless you told them. So upon graduating, one of the police lieutenants, who happened to be an uncle of mine, came over to me and says, "How come you didn't tell me you were in the academy?" I said, "Because I didn't want anyone to know. I wanted to make it on my own merit. I didn't want any special treatment or favors or anything like that." And then he goes, "Okay, glad you made it. Glad you graduated." And I had graduated top of the class. And he says to me, "I'm only going to give you one piece of advice because, you're from the village, and I don't want you to embarrass the family." But he said, "Always keep your nose clean." Right.
Mm,
And so I had a general idea of what that meant. Right. But I was 18 years old, fresh out of the police academy, not a lot of real life experience. But over the years, that keep your nose clean, phrase has come to mean at least three different things to me, right? First of all, keep the boogers out of your nose because it's embarrassing, right? You want to present yourself. You want to keep your nose a clean appearance. Second of all, it has a connotation of, your nose is dirty because you're doing drugs, right? So
mm.
but it has a broader meaning, as in, don't break the law, right? You know, be law abiding. And then the third and final meaning to me, growing up and rising through the ranks and gaining, experience in my career, is don't put that nose in anybody's butt. Don't kiss butt, right? Don't brown nose. If you we were born with brown noses, so we can't we can't help it. But the phrase has it's a metaphor for you know smooching, in order to get to the top. So in other words,
Understood.
yeah, you know, work on your own merit. Don't kiss butt is another way to say it. You know, so those are the three different meanings that I think it means to keep your nose clean, and it was very good advice, and I still follow it to this day.
Yeah, that's great advice. So you've spoken publicly about, excuse me, growing up in poverty on Guam. What would you tell your younger self today about resilience and opportunity?
Well, when I think back about my mindset at the time, it felt like there was a lot of limitations. Like I was not, meant or destined to do anything, of importance or significance. And so what I would tell myself is, something that I still remember to this day. My godfather told me, "Son, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're absolutely correct." So I would say to myself, open up your mind, um, you know, whatever limits you feel are blocking you, that's just a matter of mindset. because
Yes.
nothing, once you put your mind to something, you can get it done.
Yes. Yes. Outstanding words. Innovation leaders, it's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson here. Are you ready to elevate your vehicle fleet operations? Fleet Solutions is an AI enabled fleet management system. Fleet Solutions provides real time video, smart analytics, and total efficiency. Keep your people safe and keep your business moving forward faster than ever before. Fleet Solutions, arriving tomorrow, today. Visit thefleetsolutions.net or call 671-988-9748 to schedule your personalized demo and revolutionize your fleet operations today. So let's get a better feel for who Peter J. Santos is and what you're all about. You know, there might be a lot of listeners who might only know your name from like headlines or whatever. Let's talk a little bit about you. Talk about how your childhood shaped your views on justice and public services.
Yes, having grown up from quote unquote the wrong side of the tracks, right? In the poverty side, I felt like justice was something only certain people in society uh, enjoyed. I felt like um, the other, I guess, 98% of the population that aren't wealthy have to just deal with injustice, and that they couldn't have justice. But of course, being in the police department, being in the military, I met people from all different walks of life, and learning about our criminal justice system and our society in general. America is a place where idealistically, right, everyone should be treated equal. And so, what I've learned is that actually, if people make it important, if a society makes it important, then we can see fairness and justice throughout society if society makes it a priority. And I see that in Guam. I've seen it in other places as well, but it is not something that is just reserved for the few. It's supposed to be
They,
something that is enjoyed by all.
yeah, they call it being the change you want to see. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So we talked before about all of the different uniforms and roles that you've had, right? So talk about how that shaped you and what are some of the common threads that you can kind of point out or link between all of those different roles you've had: police officer, JAG, prosecutor, defense attorney, etc.
Yes. Well, first I'd like to, you know, touch back on my origin story about how I grew up with, dealing with having to be on public assistance, welfare, food stamps, free housing, you name it, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it segues into the question. So, growing up with that kind of dependency mindset, um, when I became a police officer, and now it's my turn to help, right? I was always the one getting the help. I was always the one being assisted, right? Whether through it social programs or uh, even programs in school. And so now I became the helper, and that really shifted my mindset, because now I'm helping people that are in need. I used to be the one in need. And
Mm,
the more that and then in the military, right? When you're an officer, you're not just responsible for operations. You're actually responsible for the health and well-being of the soldiers as
of
well
the
as their
people. Yeah.
families, right?
Yes.
And so and then again, as a prosecutor, you're the one enforcing the law, the one that is seeking justice for victims, right? And then now, as a defense attorney, you're the one that's assisting people who are accused of crimes and protecting their rights and making sure that the process is fair. So all those different roles has allowed me to see society and human nature from different vantage points, from being the one in need to the one providing the assistance, at different levels. As a police officer, you're providing assistance at some level, and then as a prosecutor, as a army officer, you're providing assistance. I mean, it just runs the whole gamut. I've seen a lot of things that were mind blowing just because you're put in those positions of responsibility and authority, right? That not everybody gets the privilege of having to do and assist people in certain ways. Even homicide investigations, right? That is something that not everybody gets to do. When I was a homicide investigator, it was very exciting, but it was also, eye-opening to see the human nature aspect of it, because you have, of course, the defendant, you have the victim, and then you have the survivors, right? The family
Yeah.
of the victim. And to investigate a homicide and see all different, try to put those pieces of the puzzle together, and then even, having to go to the autopsy and see what, what takes place there. Um, all of these experiences have shaped me as a person, as a human being, and as a public servant, because these are a lot of things that not a lot of people get to do. I've enjoyed doing it. It has been really, really eye-opening, and I still continue to want to be curious and learn more, about our society and about how we operate as a society.
Well, I love the way that you frame it, going all the way back to the very beginning. You talked about you started off life early as the person in need, in in need, and then soon you started moving to the person who was actually responsible for helping. And a lot of times it's hard for people to make that transition. Now, your roles and the responsibilities that you were given based on your role and titles and jobs you had kind of forced that paradigm change. But even if you don't have a role or title change that forces that paradigm change, you've got to mentally got to be in a place of mind where you're thinking, yeah, I might not have a lot of money, I might not have a lot of power or prestige or whatever, but I can give of my time. I can give of my hands, my service or whatever. So yes, I don't have much money, I don't have much power or whatever, but I can give of my time and my hands, my service in whatever kind of way that I can. And oh, by the way, knowing that God has blessed all of us with all kinds of different talents and stuff. So instead of hiding your talents, you're giving your talents away to the community to make it better. And I think you kind of the way that your life unfolded, you gave it through the different roles and jobs that you were doing, giving back to the community in that helping role. So that's just really outstanding to see that.
I really believe in paying it forward. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share a story hitting upon your point. The late, great activist and Chamorro activist and Senator Angel Santos, I remember he was asking me when I was 18 and I was still in the police academy to go out and protest with them. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I'm in the police academy, and that would not be, that would be frowned upon for me to go out and stand in the middle of the street and protest. But what else can I do other than helping you, go and protest? And we had already had several conversations at the time, and he knew that I was taking care of my grandparents. And he says to me, "You're already doing it, you know, just taking care of your grandparents, that is enough. We just need people to be responsible human beings, right? If you are not being a negative impact on society, even if you're not, like you said, you're not rich or powerful or anything like that, as long as you are a net positive, right?
Yes.
You're not a drag on the system, a drain on the system, and you're doing something to assist, as little as it is. I mean, everyone's expected to take care of their elders, right? And that's what I was doing. I was
Yes.
caring for my grandmother and my grandfather. But at the time, he said, don't undervalue that. That is tremendous, right? And I just thought, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do because that's our culture. We're supposed to care for our elders. But he made me realize that that act of love and of assistance is has a tremendous impact you know on society as a whole, because that's two less people that have to rely on anybody else that's not family for their needs. So
Right.
being self-reliant, taking care of your own, that in and of itself makes an impact on society.
Yes. Yes. Most definitely. All right. Let's shift gears a little bit and kind of talk about another kind of topic or theme, if you will. Let's talk about reforming the government of Guam's procurement system and fiscal operations. I know that that is a key point of your campaign platform. So first, let's start off at a 30,000 foot view. Walk us through your procurement and financials portal vision and what that looks like and why it's important.
So this is not something new that I thought of. I always draw on my past experiences. And when I was a fiscal advisor, a legal advisor in the military, whenever any of the units needed something, we had to go through this procurement portal. They would submit the proposal, right? It would have to have a scope of work, it would have to have everything. And then in the portal, it couldn't move forward unless certain agencies had blessed off on it, had done the review, right? So the contracting officer, uh, the fiscal officer of the unit, the legal advisor, and then the commander, right, who signs off and authorizes the money. So it went through a process, a uniform, streamlined process. And one of the problems, Rob, is that here on Guam, in Gov Guam, right, we have too many stovepipes, and there are too many agencies. Well, not too many, but all the different agencies all do it different. There's no uniformity. But the other thing is, when you dig below the surface, sometimes the people in the office are the only ones that have. There's one person that has all the records. One person, if they go on leave or they're sick, then you can't have access to that records, right? Or what if they die, God forbid, right? Then all that information is gone, right? And so how can we do an audit? How can we track it? We can't. We
Right.
just can't, right? And so that's the purpose of having this digital portal, is because everything's going to live there. And whether it's you or your coworker or your boss or your subordinate, whatever you do, whatever you touch is going to live there forever. And so when someone needs to audit it, when someone needs to look at it, have oversight or whatever, you could be gone and dead. You could have moved to New Jersey or whatever. The records are still going to be there. The information and the
Yes.
data is still going to be there. And that's the beauty of this system. But we're living in like the 1930s, the way we do business here, right? And that's not really much of an exaggeration, because when you have agencies that, one, have their own rules, and two, one, they don't have trained people. They have people that are keeping all the information to themselves, and then that's why we can't do these audits properly, because records are lost, records are never kept in the first place, so on and so forth,
Yes.
right? And so, like I said, in this digital portal, your procurement can't move forward until you have all the required documentation and all the reviews and the signatures that are needed. And it's not a new concept. I left the Army, 15 years ago, active duty, and this was what we were doing back then, right?
Yeah. So I draw upon my own federal government experience through the military. So one, a Lean Six Sigma black belt, and the Air Force was using people like me to look at how they could streamline their procurement process. And they were looking at, all the way from requirements, um, identification, all the way through requirements development, through uh, crafting RFP to um, um, putting out the solicitation, then doing the solicitation award, contract award process, and protest all the way to the end. And one of the things that we found was that you can't really change a system that you can't measure and monitor, right?
Right.
So it drove people to do exactly what you're talking about, some kind of portal or system where the data lives, so that you're not talking about people's opinion of what truth looks like, or what might be wrong, or what might be going good, or whatever. You have facts. You know how long it sat at each area. You start looking at some of the ways that you can improve, and you can focus in and use continuous process improvement tools to understand, oh, here are my bottlenecks. Let me now dive into those areas and look at how do I unclog those bottlenecks so that the system can flow. And that was a very key process to get down to certain kinds of goals. Whether you say that you want a 90-day solicitation, 180-day, excuse me, a 90-day contract award, 180-day contract award, or even a 365-day award. That goal starts with understanding the process, and then being able to understand where your bottlenecks are in that process. So I completely am on board with you. And obviously, on the front end and on the back end, like you said, for front end, being able to have transparency in everything that's out there to bid on, so there's not all of these confusion and stuff like that, and being able to understand where your qualified sources and stuff are, as well as on the back end when it comes time to audit and uh, do process improvement to it. A portal system makes a whole lot of sense.
Right. And there's really three things I believe that our procurement system needs to have. And that's one, it needs to be efficient. Two, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be accountable. And I believe the portal would accomplish this. The other thing about the portal that I would recommend and advocate for is, get rid of all these solicitations in the media or in papers. That's an old rule, right? Why not just have a uh, page on the portal where all government RFPs, IFPs will be? And then anyone who deals with the government or who wants to deal with the government, they will know that this is where you go. This is where
Like the
everything
SAM
is.
system for the federal government.
Correct. One centralized system. Like I said, this is
Yeah,
not something I invented. This is something I see that works well, and so what we should adopt here on Guam. And I know there's
correct.
going
It's
to
a
be
best
pushback.
practice for some of the most complex procurement that goes on in the federal government and in the military. You have the SAM system, the system for award management, and it has everything in one place, and everybody knows
Absolutely.
where you go to
I mean, we
for
do
it.
it now for employment, right? For jobs or for government jobs. There's I think the Department of Administration website that has all the job openings. We can do the same thing for IFPs, RFPs, all that stuff, right? And then the other thing, Rob, is that you can build a great system, but it's not going to be any good if you don't train, advise, and monitor folks. And that's where, the OPA, GSA, and the
Yes,
OAG,
yes,
we all have to, for the OAG, the Office of Attorney General, they should be the ones to provide the legal technical assistance, training. And then, of course, they have a role in monitoring and, avoiding problems. This is what I call preventative law. right? And again, it's
Yes.
not something that I dreamed up. I don't purport to be some great guru. I just have past experiences where, you know, things worked very well. And I see that that can, should be adopted and implemented in the government of Guam. They say smart people make learn from their mistakes, but wise people learn from other people's mistakes, right?
Yes.
So we want to be
Yes.
wise, not just smart. There's there's a saying in Chamorro. It says "Malati lo titonto." This is, well, he's smart, but he's not wise, right? So there's
Mm.
there's book smarts and street smarts, right? So there's a
Yes.
it's a very, very ubiquitous statement or a phrase that a lot of most Chamorro people know. Malati lo titonto. He's smart, but he's not wise, right?
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. And so we were both participants at this summer's procurement conference. Uh,
Mhm.
Tell me about your thoughts on the overall conference, as well as Speaker Blas's procurement and modernization initiatives, as well as the governor's um, um, basically goals that she threw down to make improvements. What do you think of those things?
Well, first of all, it was a little eye-opening to hear from the public auditor, BJ Cruz. He has tremendous institutional knowledge, um,
Yes.
right? And he was a senator for a long time, and I've spoken to other senators, like former Senator Ishizaki and Tom Adden and things like and people like that who were there when the procurement system was being tinkered with, and they tell me there were a lot of things that they tried to push but got a lot of pushback, and never, eventually it didn't eventually come to fruition. So there are a lot of modernization things that they wanted to do that got a lot of pushback. Well, Senator BJ Cruz or Public Auditor BJ Cruz, even Justice BJ Cruz, he's wore a lot of hats, right? He
Yes.
gave us a good rundown in history, and then his bottom line, I guess, was it's a really not such a bad system as everybody wants to make it out to be. They make it look like it's the boogeyman. The problem is implementation. People are not,
Absolutely.
yeah,
That
people are not,
that
and
was
that's
my big takeaway from
yeah.
from it as
Going
well. That
going back
that a
to
lot
what,
of the problems are having to do with
yeah.
people just not following what's already written in law and nobody being held accountable and disciplined for
And so then, Rob, the
following.
question becomes, why aren't they following, right? Because they're not being
Correct.
forced. And if you have this portal, guess what? They're going to have to follow it, right? Because
Yeah.
nothing's going to get done until it meets those requirements. And then the other thing is, the other takeaway from that was, look, there are a lot of agencies on Guam that are doing just fine. They're doing great,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
they have their in-house team of experts, right? They have, and these are the autonomous agencies, right? Like the airport, the power authority, the waterworks,
Yes.
right? These are the folks, the port authority.
GCC was another one that was highlighted.
Yeah, GCC. They have folks that know what they're doing. So what is really the problem? The problem is, you know, whether an agency has the institutional knowledge and the ability to attract, recruit, and maintain and retain folks that are able to get this stuff done. So the question then becomes, why can't it happen across the board? Not all agencies are created equal when it comes to funding and resources, right? And so these autonomous agencies, of course, they generate their own funds, so they run more like a business, right? And and
Yes.
it, and so the bottom line has to always be the priority, and so that's why they have these folks that are technically smart and they're paid very well, right? And treated very well. And so that's why those people are successful, or those agencies are successful, So the question is, why can't we share that knowledge and culture across the board? And when you don't have the resources or the funding, then of course you're going to be just struggling, right? You're not going to be able to provide the services that you're supposed to provide. You're just going to be like sitting there collecting a paycheck, not really doing anything for the government, right? Or for the
Right.
public rather, right? And so we want to avoid that. We want to make all agencies efficient and accountable and transparent. And so having a portal like this, I believe, and it's not just the procurement portal, but it's also fiscal operations. Everything, every nickel and dime that you spend has to live there. Again, the same problem, right? When you look back at the cases that are in the headlines, is because someone had the files or someone had the receipts and they're no longer at the agency. We can't, that's no way to operate, right? Everything has to be centralized and standardized. That way, you, me, or Joe Q Public can go over there, and you wouldn't have to FOIA anymore. You would just be able to get in there. Of course, you're going to have limited access, right? You might have only read-only privileges, and then there's going to be some places that are going to be restricted, that are not going to be available to the public. But for the most
Right.
part, all the I guess bottom lines should be out for everyone to view. What did this agency spend their money on, right? How much did
And
they
I think
spend on
that's
cars? How much did they spend on personnel? How many did they spend on supplies? Things like that.
so I think that's really important because I've been to a couple of public hearings so far, and I'm amazed at the different government agencies who's screamed about they're underfunded, under-resourced, or whatever, but they're not even executing their budgets. Like, if you're a government agency and you're not executing 40 to 50% of your budget, how can you even be successful in doing your mission? Your issue isn't that you're not giving the funds. The legislature's appropriating the funds. You're not executing the funds. You're not
Correct.
spending it
Correct.
in order
Yeah.
to get the mission done. And you might have 1,000 different excuses about why you're not able to execute it within the fiscal year, but it's still your problem. You
Right.
can't execute, not the fact that you're not getting any money. So a lot
Mhm.
of these stories out there tend to come back
Yeah.
around to,
The false
execution rather
narratives,
than,
right? The
yeah,
false narratives.
false narratives. I don't have the resources that I need. I'm underfunded, but yet when you go back to the numbers and your budget, you're not executing. So, and oh, by the way, you haven't made any requests, any specific requests on the things that you need or whatever. Here's my plan to execute the funds that I've been given by the
to,
legislature.
to be fair, a lot of times, right, the budget is lapsed because either there was a procurement issue, so they didn't get to effectuate a contract, or they weren't able to hire folks, or this and that, and so you have those funds that go unspent. But the question then becomes is, what did you do to rectify, right? What did you do to recruit? What did you do to,
And how
you
high
know,
did that go?
right?
Who knew that you were getting ready to basically have expired funds because you can't execute because you ran into a procurement problem or whatever? Did the person above you, did the Department of Administration, did the lieutenant governor, did the governor, etc., know about that?
And you know what is always amusing to me is when they ask for dates. When did you do this? When did you do that? Oh, I sent it yesterday. Well, the oversight hearing was today. You knew about the oversight hearing, for weeks, and you just did all your action yesterday, right? What took so long? Why'd you wait until the day before the oversight hearing? Was it so that you could come here and say, oh, you did what you're supposed to do? But my question then is, why didn't you do that 4 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago when it should have been done? Right? Why
Yeah,
why why was that email sent yesterday?
yeah,
Right? It
yeah.
really is very telling when people show up to these things and they scrambled at the nth hour to get everything done so that they can go over there and say, yep, I did everything I was supposed to do. No, that's not how it
Yeah.
works.
Well, I think this is a good segue point into kind of the next major theme, which is continuous process improvement in the AG's office. Um, so we've been talking about some of the issues: lack of execution, lack of transparency, lack of follow up or training and stuff like that. But where do you see the major bottlenecks right now in the AG's office?
Okay, first of all, there is a manpower issue over there. Um, so they are supposed to have 60 attorneys. They have about 22. So there are some divisions that are absolutely shuttered, right? There's no one there at consumer protection. It's a ghost town, and so the first thing is, in order to implement, right, you have to have not just warm bodies, but competent and proficient folks. And so the first task would be to increase the manpower strength up there. Then we got to go look at the systems. Drawing again back to my military days, we were required periodically, like every 2 years, to look at one aspect of operations and see, that we had SOPs for everything. The military, right? They've got
Yeah.
SOPs for chewing gum, right? How to fold the wrapper when
Yes.
you're done and all that. Be that as it may, there is a requirement that SOPs shouldn't be older than 2 years old, right? If there's no change, then okay, that's fine. But there should be some indication that it was reviewed at least, you know,
Right.
every 2 years.
Right.
Sometimes you can review something and there doesn't need to be anything changed, or there can't be changed, right? Because it's a statute or something like that. But you need to look at, at least one aspect of your operations every quarter, at least. And one of the things that I've seen go backwards over there is in the charging, right? And that's what I'm saying about criminal charging is, when someone is arrested, someone has 48 hours to be magistrated. And in order to do that, you have to write a declaration of probable cause. Well, right now we've been seeing a huge failure rate of about 40%, right? Where people would come to be magistrated and the judge would have to dismiss the case because the declaration was improperly written, right? These are very technical legal documents. You have to show all the elements of the crime. But what's not happening right now is the new prosecutors are not being trained properly. They're showing up on day one and they're saying, there's the files, the court is down in Agana, go, right? And so that's the problem is there's no training going on. And so that's a process that needs to not be changed, but re-implemented, right? You have to have a training for your new prosecutors. You cannot just expect them and it doesn't matter whether they're fresh out of law school or they're 30 years, a lawyer. I have experience in everything from trying on both prosecution and defense, rape, homicide, robbery, burglary, all the above. But you can't send me to Chicago and start trials in 2 weeks, right? It's different. It's just different. Even though I
Yeah.
have all these years of experience as a trial attorney, both prosecution and defense, I can't just go to some other, even Saipan. Saipan is different.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do that. And that's what's happening is they're hiring folks that come to Guam, and then almost immediately, I have a case right now that's up in the Supreme Court because the prosecutor came. He was only here about 2 weeks and he was trying the case and he just kept fumbling and bumbling all through the trial. And so they declared a mistrial. And I said, wait a minute, you just because the prosecutor is unprepared, that's not a mistrial, right? Because they didn't want the case to go to the jury with all the fumbles and bumbles. And that's a low profile case, but there's been some high profile cases where there's been fumbles and bumbles all along the way. And we're talking about like the red Jeep case, we're talking about some homicide cases, high profile cases, and the prosecutors are just fish out of water, right? When they're here and they've only been on island for less than 30 days, and next thing you know, they're trying a double homicide, right? So that's not how that's not how it's supposed to work. And the problem is that we have an attorney general that doesn't recognize that, right? And so he said in his campaign that, when he becomes attorney general, it doesn't matter whether you're a child support attorney or a civil law attorney. You're all attorneys. You have a law license. If I need you to prosecute a homicide case, I will make you prosecute a homicide case. Well, he's done that, and we've seen the results, and that it's pretty dismal. And so these are things that need to go back. The balance needs to be brought back to the attorney general's office. It needs to be um, operated and run the way it has traditionally been run, with training and with people who are subject matter experts. You can't say, well, you're a dentist, but we don't have a heart surgeon today, so you're going to perform heart surgery, right? You can't do that. It's the same thing with lawyers. I would be lost if I had to go do a custody case, because I've never done a custody case, right? I wouldn't know where to start. The terms are different in family law, right? In juvenile court, I would be lost because the terms are so different in there. They use different terms to mean the same things, you know, that are equivalent in adult court. They say things that I'd be lost. And so we have to get back to reality, so to speak, uh, up at the Attorney General's office. They have to get back to reality and not operate in this academic exercise that's in the Attorney General's head, that he thinks everything, that everyone's created equal. They're not. It's not that, and that's why we're seeing so much problems.
Okay, so um, what does your 100-day process improvement plan look like? What would you do in your first 100 days if you were elected to the office? And what role does technology and data play? We've been talking a lot about people and training and SOPs. Let's talk about technology and data playing into this overall improvement plan.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned technology and data, because uh, the AG's office just transitioned to a new uh, operating system when it comes to a criminal database, so to speak, case management system, right? And from what I'm hearing from my colleagues over there, it's hampering them, right? Because they're used to the old system. The new system didn't have a really good migration, and so they're actually working at a disadvantage right now because they're kind of flying blind on a lot of things. If you understand what I'm saying, some of the information and data that normally would be at their fingertips is now no longer there, and they would have to actually physically go into the file room and look stuff up, and that is just disadvantageous. And that's not the attorney general's fault, right? That's uh, that's just the growing pains with any new migration. Well, this is not something that is new or revolutionary. System migrations happens all the time. You got to ask, okay, what did they do to prepare for that migration? And did they plan well enough? Because now you have a system that's pretty much junk, right? And so, because, as you know, junk in, junk out, right? If you
Right.
whatever you feed into it is what you're going to get out of it. And so the technology aspect, we're going to have to improve on that. It's going to have to be improved. There's going to have to be training. They're going to have to go back and look at what went wrong in the migration. That's just to get you back to normal. Then there are some products that look promising as far as AI is concerned. right? That even we over here are looking at. But we have to be very careful of AI when it comes to the criminal justice world because we are very technical. I saw a U.S. or a Gov Guam or Government of Guam Supreme Court oral argument a couple weeks ago where one of the parties used AI, and Chief Justice Torres called him out and said, "Look, you cited some cases that are non-existent. They don't exist. Was this a hallucination of the system? What system did you use?" Right? You can't have that because it is just it's malpractice. It's right. So AI can be used for certain things, especially with legal research. Um, there are potential, advantages and usefulness for AI in legal work, but it has to be done very carefully, very, very carefully. There are existing legal resources like Westlaw that are starting to implement AI. However, they're doing it very cautiously, very carefully, and so it's something that the legal world can rely upon. Other AI products out there that have not been vetted or carefully used by or scrutinized by uh, legal resources like that. Some of them have to, you know, some of them, or all those that aren't part of the established legal resources, you really need to scrutinize and be very careful with them because you can end up in a situation where you as an attorney can get in a lot of trouble and even maybe get your license revoked, right? So as
Right.
far
So
as
just like with everything on AI, you have to um, validate and verify. All it is a helper. So just like if you had an assistant who was doing work for you, you couldn't just take the assistant's work and then present it as your own. The expectation is because you're at a higher skill level or higher title that you're actually scrutinizing this and going through and making the changes, the improvements, etc. That's the same way that you got to do with AI, with really anything, whether you're talking about AI applied to legal, engineering, math, or even simple, writing or whatever. You've got to verify and validate. You can't just say, well, this is what came out of the machine.
right. And going back to the 100 days, Rob, if I'm the AG, there have been roughly 230 employees that have left the AG's office since this last AG sat down. So what I would do is I would offer anyone, because they're the ones that have the institutional knowledge, right? I would offer anyone, if you have reemployment rights and want to come back home, right? I know it's going to be tough for some of them because they found great homes in other places, uh, especially the ones that have lots of institutional knowledge, like the attorney that left the AG's office to go work for GPA. She lived and grew up at the AG's office, and she was one of the most successful uh, attorneys in front of the Guam Supreme Court. But she was driven away. She landed softly over at GPA, where she works now. But I'm not sure that that's really, you know, what what being an in-house counsel for a power authority. I'm not sure whether that's really her heart and soul, right? And so I would offer people like her, hey, you want to come back? You know, you want to come back and go back to doing what you loved doing before. And so in that first 100 days, I'd ask any of the staff or attorneys if they want to come back, you know, and the reason why they left is pretty clear. It was an unfriendly environment over there, so they had, in order to preserve their sanity and their health, they had to leave. But you know, if they want to come back, especially since they possess all that institutional knowledge, I would happily bring them back. And so from
So,
there, yeah, we can try to, you know, uh, after the first 100 days, we get the folks levelized, we get folks trained, we start to fix the problems with the technology, and then we can, you know, like everything else, crawl, walk, run, right? That's what we're taught. And so that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to go through that crawl phase, then that walk phase, and then we're going to keep running and running and running until, until we break all the records.
so from a leadership and management standpoint, what are likely metrics and KPIs that you would use to assess the health of how the AG office is running? Obviously, you come from the military, and as that saying about, you know, those things that don't get measured don't get improved, right? So, what are those measures that you would use to point to showing that we're actually improving, we're actually um, performing our mission and succeeding and being efficient at it?
Fortunately, everything that is done up there has to be documented. How many charges we made, um, how many clearances we do, how many, you know, everything that we do is there's a metric for it, right? But as a leader and a manager, and they're not the same thing, right? Leaders and managers are
Correct.
different things, right? But as a leader and a manager, uh, I believe in that old saying, happy cows produce more milk, right? So and that's again just what was instilled in me as an army officer is that you have to take care of the soldier and the soldier's family as well. So one of the things that is going to be critical for me as a leader and a manager is to make sure that one, our personnel are properly resourced. Second, properly trained, and third, that they are happy, right? That the morale is good. And how do you do that? You treat people with dignity and respect. You offer them ways to professionally develop, right? To so that they can become. You invest in them so that they can become better employees, better public servants. You should be pushing your folks to rise through the ranks, rise, through the steps, the corporate ladder, if you will. And so you provide them with these opportunities. If you don't, then someone else will. And we see that as what happened, right? If people are not being given discretion, if people are not being given responsibility, right? Because either you're afraid they're going to surpass you or they're going to get more certifications than you. Well, if you don't give them that, someone else is going to give them. And so that's
Yeah,
why they leave, right? And so
yeah,
that's why you give them these opportunities to improve so that they stay, right? A lot of managers, non-leaders, right, fail to realize that when you make someone potent, they're not a threat to you, right? They're an asset. They're going to stay loyal to you. They're going to want to work harder for you, right? And I say that generically, but my leadership style is that nobody works for me. I work for them. If I'm the officer in charge, my job is to resource them, to train them, and to hold them accountable to do their duties. Because at the end of
good
the day,
leadership.
yeah, they work for the people. They don't work for me. I work for them, and we all work for the people. That's my
Yeah,
my mentality. And so that's how I would lead that agency or any agency that I'm at if I'm
yeah,
the leader.
yeah. The upside down triangle
Yes.
hierarchies there. Yeah. All right. So let's kind of move out, kind of gauge out. We've been talking about the internal operations of the AG office. Let's now talk about how the AG office is supporting other parts of the government of Guam. What are the other agencies saying right now about the quality of their legal service and any gaps that they see?
Well, there's more gaps and less quality. Not only so, if you don't mind, Rob, there's two main roles of the Attorney General. One, he's the chief legal officer of the government of Guam, not the people of Guam, the government of Guam, meaning he provides the legal services to the agencies. The other hat that the AG wears is he's the chief prosecutor, right? And so when you're the chief prosecutor, you have to work well with the law enforcement agencies and your federal counterparts. Right now, law enforcement on Guam and federal counterparts are, they really are keeping the AG's office at arm's length, right? They're not really working with them because there's just no trust and there's no relationship there. So that's that. Now, going back to the agencies and the services that are supposed to be provided, I mean, you're aware early on that there was a letter sent out saying, we're no longer, AG's office is no longer going to be representing you, and assisting your agency because, oh, by the way, we might end up prosecuting you, right? So that went to court, and the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. You can't abdicate your duties. You can't abscond, right? And so what I'm hearing is that only the most critical contracts and stuff are getting reviewed. There's been a lot of pullback of services, like for a lot of the agencies that are going in front of the Civil Service Commission that used to be represented by the AG's office. The AG is no longer doing that unless it's a pet case or a case of personal interest to the AG, then he'll send somebody, right? And this is exactly what's going on. The AG is picking and choosing who he wants to serve, and that's not any way to operate, right? It's like police officers choosing who they want to serve. You're supposed to serve.
So let's talk about what it looks like. How can the AG's office really act as that government in-house counsel partner, particularly in light of what I think the AG's concern was? You're finding corruption and illegality in different aspects of those government departments. How do I be that effective in-house counsel so that I'm representing them correctly, giving them the legal service they need, while at the same time not taking a blind eye or putting a buffer between corruption and illegality that I see.
Right. So that is a very loaded question, but let me try to answer it this way. So there are different divisions up at the AG's office, and the AG is supposed to be the figurehead of the agency, right? There are different divisions. He is not a line worker. He is not a line attorney, right? He is the agency figurehead, and his job is to get resources and to ensure operations are running smoothly. His job is not to get into the weeds, right? And personally know all facts and information, right? He's supposed to have different deputies and a chief deputy. And the way when I was up there under Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, it worked just fine. We had our deputies that worked in the civil, solicitor, family, child support, juvenile sections, right? And consumer protection. And then you had your deputy that ran the prosecution division. And there were strict or divisions, physical, divisions. No one can see, each division weren't privy to the other division's records, right? And so that's why, or that's where, we were able to operate and wear multiple hats because we were physically divided, but under one, and that's the danger of when you have an AG that wants to know everything, right? Then that's a conflict that's created. It's the Supreme Court, like they said, there is an inherent conflict in the way the structure of the AG's office is, but you can create conflict if if you act in a certain way.
Yeah. So that's a great answer about kind of the wall between the different areas of the AG's office. But now I'm going to put on my devil's advocate hat. All right. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for you. If I've been brought into office as the AG under the concerns of the people and optics of the people, that the AG's office is soft on government crime and illegality, right? And I'm not paying, my whole thing is I need to pay more attention to government crime and misdeeds. How do I go about doing that while at the same time being a good in-house counsel or partner?
Well, first of all, you give your customers, which is the government of Guam, good, solid legal advice, and you don't tell them to do anything illegal. And like I said, preventative law, right? Train,
Preventative law. There you go.
advise,
Yeah.
and monitor, right?
Yeah.
So that, and they're going to be bad actors that do not follow your advice or do things that um, they know are illegal, but they withhold that from you. So then there's no conflict there because now you have a bad actor, the criminal, just like anybody else, that you were not in cahoots with, right? As their legal advisor, and in fact, they they ignored your advice, and you didn't have any knowledge of that advice, and so those communications also are privileged, right? And so whatever civil division talked about with their client, if there is a criminal case, then there'll be a criminal investigation. But that prosecutor shouldn't be going over to the civil attorney and saying, "Hey, tell me about your conversations with your client," right? That's you just don't do that,
Should be a
and that's what
wall there.
right. That's what was happening under this administration was they were commingling information, so to speak. And that, again, like the Supreme Court said, the system is not designed with inherent conflict, but if you do certain things, you can create conflict. In other words, you can shoot yourself in the foot, and that's exactly what he did. And that's why those cases got dismissed. He was found
Yeah.
to have violated, conflict of interest.
Okay. All right. Those are all great answers, and I appreciate um, the analysis uh, to rebut my devil's advocate questions and stuff. So let's turn to another theme, Chamorro land trust and indigenous rights. Let's talk about that. First of all, what is the Chamorro land trust and what's broken about it today?
So back in the 70s, they established a law that would, um, I guess, emulate some other homestead type programs in other states, right, for indigenous
Hmm.
people. And so they created the land trust, and it went through many different forms. There was land for the landless, which was a program where you would just buy the land from the government and it would be yours forever. There are some folks who did that, and they're now the owners of the land. But then it decided, that is a problem because people can turn around and sell the land, and so they made it more of a lease program for indigenous folks, and then that got legally challenged. But the structural problem is that there's this corpus, if you will, this uh, inventory of land that's supposed to be uh, controlled by the land trust, but it can be raided by the legislature. And so that's the structural problem, right? Um, the legislature can override pretty much anything the land trust does, the land trust commission does. So that needs to be fixed. They need to categorize the land and then do a carve out for government because government still has needs, right? And then let the land trust be a true land trust. It's a land trust in name only. It doesn't act or behave like one because if it did, then nobody else would be able to raid them and they would have full control over it, right? And the land trust members should be elected. They shouldn't be appointed because if the governor or whoever else doesn't like somebody or doesn't like what they're doing with the what the commissioners are doing, then they'll replace them. Well, that's why you have commissioners because you entrust them to make the decisions and to be the guardians, right? And so they need to categorize. There's three categories. There's agricultural, residential, and commercial. So they need to categorize these lands, and that's what they're going to be used for, right? There's too much fighting and controversy. If we just categorize all the land and use it the way it's supposed to be used, then that would be more efficient, right?
Okay.
But mainly it's the fact that it can still be rated.
So let me ask you this question again, putting on my devil's advocate hat. What would you say to the people who might think, um, that's in the purview of the government, excuse me, the governor and the legislature? The AG has a minor role in this. What can the AG really do to influence or impact this?
Well, the the AG can advocate to change the laws, but the AG also provides a legal advisor to the commission. And from my talks with the current commissioners and past commissioners, and this is going back, you know, long time, the legal advisors either sometimes never showed up, or they showed up and they were asleep, or they showed up and they fielded questions but never responded. So in other words, it was very evident to the commissioners that the land trust and its business was not a area of priority or focus for the AG. And that needs to be something that is made a priority and focus. And so that's how the AG can help and assist. And as
That's
far
great.
as like influencing the way it operates and its structure, that would be, through advocating to the legislature to make those changes.
All right, that was a great answer. Um, do you see any big environmental enforcement gaps in the Chamorro Land Trust right now? And if so, what would you do about it?
I wouldn't call them gaps because it's practically non-existent. So it's a void, enforcement
Mm,
void, not an enforcement gap. It's an enforcement void, right? And that is something that we need to put pressure on EPA and the Chamorro Land Trust to do a better job at being the monitors and the guardians of our environment.
okay,
As a matter of fact, the EPA they changed the law and allowed EPA to hire a lawyer, and the lawyer left the AG's office to go work over there. I just saw another lawyer at the court down there. The court always is hiring lawyers, and there's another lawyer from the AG's office that went over there. It's just a recurring theme that anytime a vacancy somewhere else in the government becomes open, someone from the AG will end up going there. And that's sad. It's unfortunate because we need people at the AG's office.
okay. All right. So last section, I want to kind of get big picture and give you a chance to kind of talk about vision for the future of Guam. So kind of big picture wise, not just from the lens of an attorney general, but Guam writ large. What kind of Guam are you fighting for? What is the Guam that you see is possible out there?
Well, we are a society and it takes really an island. And I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old currently, and they're going to grow up. I have adult children as well here, and they're living on this island. And what I think for at least the Attorney General's office, they have to provide three things: safety, protection, and justice. And so how do they do that? They do that with, you know, a stable of well trained, well resourced staff and attorneys. They do that with efficiency, they do that with integrity, they do that with transparency and accountability. And so when you have a well functioning attorney general's office, then that just assists in many different areas. Right now, the criminal justice system, right? We have our police, we have our prosecution, we have our courts, we have our probation, we have our Department of Corrections, we have our parole division. We have also our treatment courts, and we also have our different counseling services that are available, right? They're all supposed to work like a well-oiled machine. And it's supposed to be called our criminal justice system. Right now, we have one bottleneck and one broken area, and that's prosecution. And also, our civil and litigation divisions up there. It's bottlenecking everything. The reason why, Rob, we have so many people at DOC is not because the AG is doing a great job. It's actually because the AG is doing a poor job. The one that's making DOC full is the police department. And so that initiates the process. Once people are being detained, waiting their trial, the AG is supposed to either, provide a plea agreement or take it to trial. And the problem is they're dysfunctional at this point. And so that's where the bottleneck is. The bottleneck is people aren't getting their day in court. And so they're sitting up at DOC just waiting. And the bottleneck is that we don't have a fully functional prosecution office. And so that needs to be fixed. And it has cascading effects, right? The more you keep people up there, they lose their jobs, they lose their homes, they lose their automobiles. It just snowballs, right? And then when you put them up there with, like Fred Berdallo likes to say, with career criminals, then they just get influenced to do, uh, worse crimes. And so that's the problem that we have. We need to have a fully functioning system from police, courts, prosecution, and corrections. Corrections is another area that needs to be improved, but that's something that the AG can help out with technical assistance. I've been telling the director, from the previous director to this director, is that once you get the appropriation, you need to hire an attorney to build the prison, not the attorney that's an in-house attorney. You need to hire an attorney that is dedicated solely to the construction of the new prison. Because
why does it have to be an attorney?
Well, because of all the procurement issues and all that. So you would have, I've seen it where you have a contract officer and an attorney that are joined at the hip, and they're the ones that would see the process through. The director's ultimately responsible, but you need to have your subject matter experts, your contracting officer. He's basically going to be like your general contractor, right? Or your contract manager, right? And so with an attorney joined at the hip, that has to be his sole focus. He cannot be worrying about uh, employment issues, lawsuits, and other things like that. You need someone that's going to be there specifically just for that construction. But getting back to the overall picture, when we have different components of our system working well, then we have a well-oiled machine. And believe it or not, it is it reaps it goes both ways as far as the snowballing and cascading effects. When you have a well-oiled machine, then that improves life on Guam, and it just exponentially increases the positive effects. But then when you have a part that's broken, and then the machine is no longer functioning, then it has the opposite, and it has snowballing negative effects, right?
Yeah.
And so all we want is just an attorney general's office that is well established, well resourced, and you know, I hate to say it, but we need to have a competent leader that understands the law and respects the rule of law.
So I noticed you talked about the impacts that a strong AG office could have in terms of safety and justice, et cetera, but you didn't talk about economic development. Do you think that a strong AG's office supports or influences the island's economic development? And if so, how?
Well, when crime rates go down, right? Who's the most victims of crimes? Lots of businesses, right? And so when you have a safer community, when you have folks in the community that are not prone to criminal behavior or driven to criminal behavior because of negative economic effects, again, it just has that snowballing and cascading effect when you have a society that respects the laws, that is safe, then everything else is going to thrive, right? Everything from our human relations to our businesses to our schools. When we're in a safe operating environment, then that's when everything can thrive. When we're not, that's when it can go the opposite direction and have a negative snowballing effect. Businesses shuttering, people losing jobs, investors not coming to Guam, you name it. It just has a negative impact when
Okay,
there's no safety and when there's a lot of lawlessness.
I agree with that. I agree with it. Okay, as we start to wrap up and close and bring this to an end, what should voters ask every attorney general candidate, and what's the one thing you want the people to remember from you and this discussion?
So people need to understand that the attorney general, although he's elected, is not a politician. So what they need to ask is, not how this guy makes me feel, but like to quote the great Miss Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? Right? What are you going to do to improve safety and services on Guam? Right? So that's the question, not about propaganda or rhetoric, or barking loudly. What do you, as a professional, bring to the table for our society? Right? Is it, do you like someone just because they're antagonistic towards somebody you don't like? Right? Or do you like them because they have experience, knowledge, and a proven track record and good ideas, right? So, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for Guam? That's the one question that people should be asking.
All right. Well, Attorney Santos, thank you so much for sharing your powerful vision for justice, transparency, and smarter government on Guam. I really appreciate your passion for rebuilding institutions here on Guam, and I definitely connect with your message. To my audience today, I hope you were inspired and learned something new today. I certainly did. Remember to follow me on all social media platforms, including Substack. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes. And don't forget to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of the month. See you next time. And remember, whether you're at work, at home, or at play, always innovate. Thank you so much.